Hi everybody, welcome to the Shipcast. We are finally live here from sunny Puerto Rico, and we have our very amazing guest, Sunny Singh. Say hi.
Hey, what's up, Sergio? Yeah, what's up, guys?
So it's finally the second episode. It's been a while. In fact, it's actually been months since the last time I had a Shipcast up and running. Life kind of caught up, but we're finally here, and we have...
Actually, I kept asking Sergio about the second episode, like, when's the second episode going to be? And then I didn't even consider that I would be on the second episode trying to make it happen with Sergio, so this is really cool. Thanks for inviting me, Sergio.
Yeah, it's been crazy because I was looking for guests and everybody was like, "Yo, get Sunny Singh," and I was like, "You know what? Yes, let's do it." And I finally find some time to actually sit down on a Sunday and talk to somebody and get to know what they're doing in their indie maker journey. And so yeah, I'm gonna introduce a little bit of you. So Sunny is a developer from North Carolina. He's been coding since he was 13 years old, which is kind of awesome. He's building IronMike alongside Kyle McDonald, and he is creating great content for indie makers like blog posts, podcasts, and much more. And we've actually known each other for quite a long time, since a social network called Twee that is now defunct.
Yeah.
RIP. So yeah, tell me a little more about yourself, Sunny.
Absolutely. Like Kyle said, you can't hear us. You can hear me, though, right?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. It's just fine. The video is a little slow, but...
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. So, yeah, I mean, Sergio kind of touched on a lot of it. So yeah, I'm a developer designer. I'm currently in North Carolina, but I was up in New York for probably most of my life. And then before that, I was actually born in Ukraine. So, yeah, I'm kind of, my family's very diverse. My dad's actually from India, and then my mom is from Tanzania, Africa. So I have like a very diverse mindset. And so I definitely take pride in that. Yeah, IronMike is kind of the main project that I'm working on right now. And I've tried to really kind of limit on the number of projects that I'm working on. I see a lot of people kind of doing these, challenges and trying to push out multiple projects in the year. But I'm just trying to kind of, focus down on just one thing and try to get that right as well as possible. Besides product development, though, I also focus a lot on the content creation aspect. So I do my own podcasts and commutes, trying out different things on like social media, like the I Don't Code series. So I do kind of videos related around like programming, but also business, marketing, those types of things. A lot of stuff like I think indie makers should be focused on. There write articles, newsletters, things like that. So that's kind of all the things that I'm doing right now. So yeah.
All right, so I'm getting a little... So I'm getting a few comments here saying that your audio is a little too low.
Really?
Okay, I turned up the audio a little bit, so let me know if it's still a little too low. All right, so yeah, I noticed that you've been building this is kind of a little transition, but you've been building a lot of things, but mostly your personal brand. Like I've been noticing that you've been doing a lot of blog posts related to your personal brand, and you actually have one of the best brand trajectories that I've seen, at least on Twitter. I mean, you've been
really awesome to hear.
Yes, you've been pumping out content with a lot of discipline. You've been pumping out a lot of podcasts, blog posts, advice, tweets, and they're all really useful stuff. Not only code tutorials, blog posts for indie makers, advice. So I really want to get into that aspect of your current indie maker journey, right? I want to talk about your personal branding and the stuff you've been doing because I've been noticing it a lot and it's super effective. You've been hitting it hard with a lot of discipline, and that's something a lot of indie makers lack. So tell me, how did you get started with your personal branding journey, and how did you discover that you needed a better personal brand and whatnot?
So obviously I've been coding since I was 13, and so I've been building like multiple products since then. And it's always been, I don't remember, like, you remember Unveiled Entertainment or like My UNV? That was like my first kind of media site. And that's kind of my first site when I was 13. Started with that. That was like my brand. And then from there I moved on to Ninjality. It was like a web development agency. That was like web development focused brand. And then I moved on to social networks. I had Hylas, which is kind of a general purpose social network. Actually, I remember asking about it, Sergio. Apparently, I didn't invite you over to the beta.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah,
I spent
so that was
months
my
waiting for
bad.
that.
Yeah, but I had multiple projects that have all failed in one way or another. So Hylas, CodeView was in 2015. That was like the last project before IronMike, and now IronMike. And so I had all these different projects, right? And the main issue I had with kind of like jumping from project to project, brand to brand, is that I didn't have anything to push the next project that I had. I didn't have a personal brand. I didn't have like any marketing channels. I didn't have anything to help me out. And so I realized, like, obviously, I can't always, when we start a project, we always think this is going to be it. It's going to be the big project. It's going to blow up, right? Uh, Usually it's not the case. And even if you get some ounce of success, like, you don't always want to be associated 100% with that product necessarily. And so, regardless, I wanted to make sure that I had a brand that was kind of just me all throughout. I didn't want to just, have like project to project, have to market every single one, just kind of have it be about my personal brand. And that helps me, get the marketing channels I need. It helps me get kind of like a following that are just following me versus just that single project. So it's less about like making it more like marketing and having also just a person behind it. Because then if you see, people are aware of like who I am, and they might know about IronMike because I talk about it on social media and whatnot, and I write about it. I do videos, and so people will be aware of the product just through my personal brand. And they might not be a customer, but then eventually it kind of just helps build that relationship early on. So I just realized the importance of personal branding is like huge, especially nowadays, and making it seem like the business is not, just like personless like entity that you're just trying to shove marketing down their throats. So yeah, personal branding I think is absolutely huge. Oh, Sergio, I can't hear you now.
Oh, hi. So I'm getting a lot of reports
Okay.
that the stream is laggy, so I'm probably going to turn off your video. But that's fine, we're in a podcast. So um, your video is extremely laggy right now. But
Oh,
yeah,
really?
so yeah, as you were saying, I like what you're doing because that's absolutely correct. Um, doing backing your personal success off of um, one single project. It's like putting all your marbles into one thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's absolutely true that you need to build a personal brand. And it's also about building, as you said, an audience, right? So um, you want to be able to market future projects that you do to other people that are interested not just in your projects, but you as your trajectory, as your career. That's actually a great approach. So something I was touching on earlier is discipline, and that's a problem that a lot of makers face, right? So we want to do a lot of things very often. We have a lot on our plate. How do you manage to keep up pumping content daily? What are some tricks or ideas that you have that have helped you, uh, continue this content creation trajectory that a
Yeah.
lot of people aren't very good at? I mean, consistency is tough, right?
It's crazy difficult, and I'm not perfect with this either. There's sometimes like I'll go a full week or multiple weeks sometimes, not writing a single piece of code, not sharing any progress on a project, or not putting any content out. Uh, but honestly, for me, the content part helps me kind of keep up my personal brand, and it's not to say that it's easier than working on a project, but being able to release something more often, which you could do with a project. So being able to do kind of incremental feature updates, but with content, write an article, do a podcast episode, kind of something small that you can push out more, not necessarily on a daily basis, maybe like every couple of days or every week, just faster than kind of what you're mainly focusing on. And so that will allow you to kind of get that, I guess, adrenaline rush, or just kind of like the feedback of, oh, people are looking at my stuff. I'm still doing something that's relevant. Whatever you call it, but it allows you to kind of not burn out because you're able to work on something continuously without not having people. If you're streaming it, that helps, but usually you're kind of heads deep and you're just coding and you're not pushing anything out as frequently. With content, you're able to push it out more frequently and get people kind of, looking at your stuff and talking with you and stuff like that. Besides that, though, I think the biggest thing is remembering why you're actually doing what you're doing and having the passion for it. Sometimes we just forget completely why we're doing it. Just kind of, it's so repetitive, and so you forget like initially why you were interested in the first place, right? And so remembering why, kind of just having that passion for what you do. If there's something that you're not interested in, this is kind of difficult to say, but I recommend just kind of stopping it. This is why I have so many failed projects. I decided I'm not really interested in doing web development agency like client work. There might be money in it, but that doesn't matter to me personally, and so why continue doing it, right? So yes, that's the main thing. Just making sure you remember why you're doing something, and anything that you're not interested in doing, that you're not as passionate about, especially if you have school or work and you're doing all this stuff on the side, making sure you're spending your time wisely, you're spending it on stuff that you actually care about.
Wow, so my computer kind of completely froze right now, but it still works. So as long as we have audio, it's fine.
Okay.
So
this is going so well right now, right?
Everything. I mean, I stream with PyCharm, with WebStorm, with everything running at the same time, and it never freezes. First time I do a podcast, everything froze.
Yeah.
Crazy. But I'm getting reports.
Hopefully, we still get something from it.
I'm getting reports that the audio is still working, and I actually started recording right here on OBS. So even though it won't have video and the video won't be too accurate, as long as we have audio, it's completely fine, and we can edit it later.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. How are your personal? So now that we've talked a lot about discipline, how has your growth been after joining the indie maker community? How did you discover the indie maker community, and what have you learned from your whole experience from transitioning? I'm not sure if you've always been doing this, but transitioning from a traditional business model to the bootstrapped business in the human touch. How has the transition been, and how did you discover the community?
Yeah, honestly, I was always like on the different social networks, and I was kind of following your progress here and there. I remember when you were initially working on MakerLog and sharing the Discord and stuff, the initial like beta versions of it. And so I remember kind of seeing that. Product Hunt and Hacker News and all those were like around, and I was kind of within those communities, but there was really no singular place like now with MakerLog, the website, and Maker's Kitchen and the MakerLog Telegram chat. There's just so many chats. Even besides those three, I'm definitely joining more like communities now, kind of seeing the importance of them. But I think I know Kyle initially mentioned me. He was kind of a little bit closer with those communities. So he mentioned it to me, and then from him, I decided to join Maker's Kitchen. And pretty much, just my growing from that, being more active, having people to actually chat with and talk about the stuff that we're all passionate about, building products and creating content and everything around that, programming. And it was just something that allowed me to kind of stay more interested in what I was doing. It gave me the energy that I needed. And in terms of growth, it also allowed me to push like the stuff that I was working on, actually push that out to people, get feedback, get actual users from it, because we're all kind of like, someone launched a product like Chrome extension that blocks or that remembers what social network you used to log in, right? That's personally useful. And so because we're part of the same community, and that's from Peter Thielis, I think.
Peter Thielikis. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his second name, but it's probably going to be in the chat on Twitter, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, but like that's one example of great product. Kanban mail from Ethan, who was on the first episode. I would not even, besides like Product Hunt, even just seeing those products, I probably would not necessarily join them just from seeing them there or try those products out, but just being part of the community and knowing that I know this person and I see the stuff that he's been working on and he's finally launching it, I can kind of be part of that launch. And the same thing goes if I launch something, when we launched IronMike, for example, we pasted it in the different channels and stuff, and we were able to get people to upvote it based on that. And so we were able to definitely grow from that, get more people eyes on the stuff that I was building, the stuff, and then vice versa. And then in terms of just personal branding following, I guess just putting numbers to it, I don't think the numbers really matter, but just putting numbers to it. I think I had less than 300 followers on Twitter before joining. Now I'm pretty close to reaching 1,000, which is slow growth compared to most, but it's still just relatively speaking, I definitely will not be able to grow as fast, and I have more engagement. I'm able to see more people in my feed that actually care about and have people, respond to the stuff that I post. So I think there's community is so important, and I was able to, that was a big lesson for me. And then I think you had some other aspect you wanted me to mention, right?
Yeah, so actually, hold on. No, it was mostly, yeah, just about growth, and generally how how you built that, your trajectory building that audience that will help you market, as you said, market your products more efficiently. Do you find that you've been building that indie making and being close to makers of products? Do you find that has actually helped a lot in terms of growing an audience in a sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all comes down to community. So the maker community is just one aspect of it. I don't think everyone that might necessarily be watching this would be, I mean, you could be part of that community, but maybe there's someone that's more interested just purely in programming. And so there's been a couple of Twitter discussion chats that I've been a part of, and I was able to grow a following and kind of form another community of people that I'm familiar with, but they're separate from the maker community. And so in terms of growing my personal brand, they're both still like-minded people. It's the coding side, but they're still building something in terms of open source or frameworks or creating content around it. And then the maker side, where they're focusing more on building products and tools, but then there's also content on that side. And so just finding, I guess, like-minded people in different sectors of the internet in that sense is really cool, and then is able to grow my personal brand, but then also, I can shout out here and there when I'm working on IronMike or whatever projects I might work on in the future. I can be able to promote that better without kind of just spamming my timeline constantly, which is what, when people join social media initially, that's kind of what they focus on, but it's completely not about that. We should focus on actually being social on social media and kind of just pushing out content, pushing out actual value to people. And then from time to time, be like, hey, I am working on something. I would love for you to check it out. Go look at that. So I don't know if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk, but he has this phrase jab, jab, right hook. And so it kind of goes into that, provide a bunch of value and then kind of do a right hook of hey, do something back for me, but you don't have to. There's no expectation from kind of any of the stuff that I'm doing.
So you've mentioned a lot that finding a community has been a great experience for you in terms of not only building an audience, but a good experience as a developer, right? So this is something I've been thinking about, and I'd love to get your input on it. And it might be a little unrelated. It's kind of like an aside, but do you think that lately there's been a rise of small communities on the internet, that perhaps social media got a little too large and everybody is starting to break it down into very small and niche communities as it used to be before? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's actually the beauty of social media. You can kind of, especially on Twitter, you can find a group of people that like-minded people, but you kind of are able to talk about things that you care about. And if there's something that you don't, then you go block it or you don't participate in those sections. The thing is, my Twitter and your Twitter and whoever else is, especially someone that's not part of the maker community or development, they're going to see different content. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely we form kind of our circles, and we are able to kind of form our like little social networks on social networks. I think it's definitely the case. Yeah.
This is this little aside. All right, so moving on from this little aside, because it's been just watching the artisanal internet and small communities rise has been super fascinating to me. Moving on from this little aside, let's talk a little about IronMike. So IronMike, for those unfamiliar, is, as I mentioned before earlier, allows podcasts to easily create like their own websites, right? So typically for podcasts to create websites, you have to do API integrations, you have to write a lot of code to automatically fetch podcasts. And in fact, this was kind of my challenge building, or Ethan's challenge when building the Shipcast website. You had to do a lot of automation, right? And this solves a big pain point for podcasters, right? So you've been building IronMike for a while. It launched a few months ago on Product Hunt. How has that journey been, and what have you learned from the whole experience of building IronMike?
Yeah, so we're probably getting close to like a year now because we launched it in August of last year, of 2018. But the idea actually, it did conceptualize from just my own personal pain point with having my own podcast, because I wasn't even planning on starting a podcast. It was like in the back of my mind, I wasn't really considering I'd have like enough time to actually, go through the whole thing and start it. But then eventually I decided, like, you know what? I have this 30-minute commute, to work. And so why not? Let me just go ahead and do it safely, obviously. But, I just started recording on my phone, just, random topic points that I was kind of thinking in my head anyway. But the point of that is that I did not put any time into podcasting initially. And so I also did not want to put in the time to build a website for it. And every time I launched a new episode, I did not want to, build the integration into it or post manually. And so all of that kind of like with me just being lazy, I did not want to build a website for my podcast. But then instead, I decided to spend 3 months to build IronMike because I did not want to build a website, right? Which probably would have been faster. But with IronMike, I'm able to provide an automated platform that lets people build a website for any of their podcasts. So it's not just me. I'm using it obviously on Sunny Commutes, but then for any other podcast, anyone's able to, use it. And because it's automated, you don't have to worry about when you post a new episode that your website's up to date. So that's definitely the cool part about IronMike. And in that whole journey, when we initially launched, this was the first paid product. And so my biggest worry was that no one would use it because they would have to pay for it. Actually getting someone to, take out their credit card and say, okay, this is valuable enough for me to put money into this, I think is a really huge deal. And so in the first year, or initially when we launched initially on Indie Hackers, and this was a day before going on Product Hunt. And on Indie Hackers, we actually got 0 users. We got some good feedback, but nothing too crazy. Then the second day, we finally landed on the first page of Product Hunt. And then I believe we got like maybe 2 or 3 people started signing up. And that was huge. Like that was the most exciting time. If there's any time in any person that's developing and building products, like any time that's most exciting, it's definitely when you initially launch a product and start seeing users come in and sign up and especially pay you money. It's like the best feeling in the world. And yeah, so I was super excited about that when we initially launched. From there, it was pretty much just, working with our current customers and kind of making sure that everything was working. There were a couple of bugs actually. And when I went on a trip to Germany, I was actually like working remotely to try and fix the place we're staying at, using their Wi-Fi and like fixing a critical bug with the way feeds were updated. So it was a lot of stress in that case, but it was so awesome being able to work with people that were really understanding. And that's the main thing I found out is that when you have really good customers and when you have, I don't know what necessarily goes into it, but maybe just kind of the culture and kind of maybe even the design of the app and kind of promoting like a really friendly UI, maybe, I don't know, but we had customers who were like really friendly with us, and they were understanding. They knew that we were small. That's the other thing. So making sure that you let people know that you're small. It's three people. It's myself, it's Colin McDonald, and Leon Hitchens. We all kind of handle different aspects of it. But knowing that we are small actually gives us an advantage because we don't have to seem like, oh yeah, we're the big dogs. We're competing with like Squarespace and stuff, and that means that we provide a high quality. No, we're learning as we go, and we're trying to kind of fix and stabilize things as much as possible until we get to the point where like, yeah, we are one of the big dogs eventually. But just kind of working with the people who actually use your product, getting their feedback. We've implemented some things based on their feedback. It has really been like kind of a learning experience for me. So a lot of like crazy things with IronMike that's been happening. And I can also kind of talk about the future, but that's probably the big things that I learned kind of throughout all this experience.
So earlier on when you were talking about IronMike, like literally a few seconds ago, you mentioned something that's been a big pain point for pretty much every indie maker out there, right? So you mentioned that it was kind of scary, your whole transition from actually making your first paid product and all the fear that comes around with it. And this is something that I've been facing it since I've been trying to actively monetize MakerLog, and it's scary. It is absolutely
For sure.
very, 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 very scary going to people and telling them, hey, pay X every month to me, and what was a resource that helped you get out of that fear, or how did you finally move on from that fear to launching your first paid product?
I think it was just time after time launching free products. Like I had the experience with launching free products, and so I guess there's less of a surprise factor in terms of just launching something out there for me personally. And so a paid product, I guess, was like a new challenge. And I also was thinking at this point that I could take something that I have a passion for, that I enjoy, and potentially make money from it. And so it was just that confidence that I had in myself and like the people that I worked on IronMike with. Is kind of that confidence, knowing that no, we could launch something, and we could we're not there yet, but we could eventually be able to do this full time. And that's kind of one of the goals that I want eventually. And I'm sure the same goes for you, Sergio, with MakerLog and the different products you're making. You want to eventually have enough income to support yourself and the stuff that you're building. This stuff takes time. It's not like we're building something that is trivial or is not worth other people's money. I think we're all building something that is valuable, and if something's valuable to someone, there shouldn't be a fear of asking money from them, because the worst case scenario, no one pays for it, and then you look at other things that you might try to either make it valuable enough for people to pay, or you offer a free plan. So I think just trying something out, taking that risk, trying something that is completely new for you is important, because if you don't try at all, you'll never know if it actually works. And the chances are you're probably going to learn something from it too. So you really have nothing to lose if you truly think that it should be a paid product. Definitely make it a paid product. Most people actually undervalue their services. With IronMike, it's actually really cheap, but we're kind of trying to make it where it's super competitive with that way. And we're actually going to be offering a free plan in the future. There's going to be incentives to upgrade with the custom domains, which is what we support now. But we want to kind of make it where it does provide value, but we want to also grow it as a brand and make it something that when people hear about websites and podcasts, they think of IronMike, and kind of lowering that barrier to entry, kind of like what Anchor has done with podcast hosting. So the same thing for websites, and maybe we'll expand to other things. I don't know. But I think the fear is there, but just kind of trying it out and seeing what happens. There's really no risk in that, I think.
So, as you mentioned earlier, what strategies have been the most effective to gain subscribers and get people onboarding podcasters onto IronMike? What have you tried? What's worked and what's not?
Yeah, so actually the marketing tactic that we've been able to use, like it's weird calling it a tactic, but just kind of reaching out to podcasters because a lot of our audience is on Anchor, and Anchor is a free platform, and everyone has an Anchor page, but it's highly branded to Anchor's branding and not their own. And so we're able to kind of just reach out, not be super slimy about it, just kind of being like, just being active in the community. It also helps that I'm in the podcast community. I have my own podcast. So if I ever want to, reach out to someone, I can just do it as myself. This goes back to the personal branding aspect of it, right? And so it definitely helps when your product is something that you use yourself and is also maybe related in some way to kind of the personal brand that you're trying to create. But in terms of onboarding, we definitely found it where we need to reduce the friction it takes from going from the homepage to being done and having your podcast website. So there's a couple of little things that we did. The first one is we have this preview feature. And so actually, if you go on, ironmike.fm, you start searching for the name of your podcast, it will generate like a preview link with almost fully working website. If you click on something, it's going to show a pop-up saying, to sign up. But it does create a preview with all of your podcast information, everything on that page. And that's what I've been doing, actually, is I've been creating a short link of that and sharing that with people. So before they even sign up, they can see exactly what they're going to get, the full website. They can test out different themes and stuff. So I think that's been definitely a helpful thing about it, just kind of being able to go from search to a preview and then deciding there, okay, this is what I want. Like, I want to build this site right now. There's a button up top to be able to build the site. You make an account. There's Twitter and Google login, of course, and then you're pretty much done at that point. There is the paid aspect of it, and so that's kind of, I think, the biggest problem we're getting into, and hence why we want to offer a free plan with a subdomain under podcast.page. So I kind of got like this generic domain. Hopefully we can get rid of the payment screen so that you can literally go from search to having a website in like under a minute. So I think definitely reducing the friction to onboarding, reducing the number of steps it takes, making the user experience kind of as seamless as possible, not having too many forms to fill out and things like that. So just, I guess, general good UX practices definitely apply, and then just kind of wowing people with like, you're not even signed up, but you get to see what you get. So I think that's definitely the cool part.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with reducing friction. I mean, it is so important to make sign up and onboarding as simple as humanly possible. And that strategy has been very interesting because I have tried it before. I've actually logged in a few months ago. I logged into the IronMike website, and I loved the fact that you could just point a URL to it, and it would show you an example. I think it was your page at first. I think the first one I tried, it was your page. You would put in a link, and it would show you essentially a whole preview of what you would get. And that's such a draw. That helps draw people in by showing them, as you said, exactly what they're going to get. That's super, super valuable. I remember my first lesson with friction. This is kind of an aside, but my first lesson with friction was I was preparing for something called Microsoft Imagine Cup, and I had a product. And I took it to this guy who was kind of my mentor for the whole competition. And when I showed it to him, he was like, okay, let's draw out every little step that I need to take from getting to the homepage to posting a story. This was on the tail ship.
Right, yeah.
And when we put that on the whiteboard, I was so impressed that it almost covered the whole whiteboard, right? From a simple login form and sign up form, it it really showed me the importance of reducing friction, and that's probably that's probably also great advice for a lot of the listeners here. If you're worried about friction, what worked for me was just putting it on a whiteboard every single step that the user takes from homepage to action. Um, Anyways, that was a small aside. So how is IronMike doing in terms of stats, in terms of subscribers and reach? How is the business running as a whole right now?
So that is definitely the tricky part right now. I would say I definitely have stagnated in terms of the growth since I guess start of this year. We grew very quickly, so we grew. I think within the first few months we had about maybe 12 customers, something like that. Which, relatively speaking, like just getting a few customers that paid for my product was huge. And the problem is we kind of stayed there. You know, we got one or two here or there. We got a couple monthly, we got a couple yearly, and no one has really dropped out yet, which is great. But I think that right now what we're trying to do is there's a lot of people that have signed up. I don't remember the exact number, but definitely at least 100 people that have signed up as just regular users, just trying to check out the service, right? And getting them to convert over to a paid plan has been really difficult. We even got someone that emailed us saying, "Oh, I didn't even know it was a paid service. I thought it was free." Even though you scroll down on the homepage and like it says, you know, the pricing information is all there, right? But regardless, like that is still valid feedback, I think, because people will visit certain sites and they think, "Oh, this is something that should be free, or this is something that is useful, but you know, not enough for me to pay, or I don't see the advantages just yet." And so what I want to do is through, you know, podcast that page, be able to offer like, you know, it's the same service essentially, but it's, you know, it really is just a free plan. But from a branding aspect, what we're trying to do is make it where it's kind of like its own product, its own thing, where you you have this kind of idea in your head where, oh, I want my own podcast page, like a podcast that page. You know, you go to that, you search for your podcast, and then you sign up without having to pay for anything. And you have a subdomain. So you could have, for example, you know, Elon Musk, let's say he starts his own podcast. If he doesn't already, I don't know. But, you know, elonmusk.podcast.page. And so all of a sudden now you have your own personally branded website, and you know, you didn't have to, we didn't have to sell to Elon that he has to pay for the service. So I think that's kind of the huge part. So it's going to be the free plan. It's going to be reducing kind of the onboarding steps, like you said, reducing friction, and then trying to get it where our user experience, like everything is super simplified, and essentially doing like a version 2 of IronMike. I think that's something we have to do this summer to be able to, one, kind of capitalize on our brand. I think more people are aware of it within the first year. And so I think that's huge. We need to make sure that the people that are aware of it, the people that have tried it, be able to get them to actually, you know, there's a lot of more people that started podcasts this year too, which is great, especially now just in the maker community. So I'd love for them to even just, you know, if they don't have websites, for them to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to get an IronMike website," and there's nothing stopping me from doing that. So hopefully, you know, with version 2, we're able to kind of, you know, grow from where we started and not stagnate so much, and be able to continue with everything that we've been doing. So yeah, I'm excited to see kind of more where the future leads, but you know, currently I think everything's been pretty stable. It's just kind of stagnated in terms of growth.
So hold on, I'm processing. Man, I had an idea. I had something to ask you like a second ago, and I completely forgot.
Man.
So yeah, as you were saying. Oh, right. So the free plan is something that's particularly interesting, as you said, because so what you're trying to do is essentially get as many people locked in to your platform, and that's a completely valid strategy. That's a great idea, actually. I think personally that SaaSes should definitely try to, you know, as a good retention strategy. And this may sound a little evil, right? But getting people locked into your platform, perhaps using a free plan or something, to get them to just try it and put their data there and have that commitment is definitely something that can help ease conversions later, right? So what are your thoughts on this strategy? And is this something kind of like what you're aiming for with IronMike?
Yeah, because so we initially launched obviously as a paid product, and that was kind of the big part of it, which is why I didn't want to do a free to kind of be my first paid product and something that people paid to use. And there is like a quality thing to it too. I figure, if we make this really good, we put a price on it that anyone that's, that looks at it, they'll pay for it and we'll have the same number of users. Obviously, though, it's not the case. There's going to be way more users than you are going to have actual paid customers. And, just because there's still people though that are looking at the site, I think it's totally valid technique to offer some sort of free plan to kind of lock people in. Because one, if they will ever want to leave, they still can, right? And you should not like shove marketing down their throats, send a bunch of emails. Like, I don't recommend doing any of that stuff.
Absolutely.
But just having kind of, people will log in, do what they need to, and kind of just having in there like, oh, have you considered like having a custom domain? Or, that, IronMike logo we have at the bottom, do you want to like remove it so you could have a completely kind of professional looking site? There's zero IronMike branding. And we're trying to minimize it. It's like, it's at the bottom. It's not like the other podcast sites, but, just kind of being able to not market just to any random person, but actually market to people that are already in your platform, I think is huge. And so we saw, hundreds of people are visiting the site and signing up, but they're not converting. Well, we should focus on those people instead of focusing on the much larger market outside of IronMike and focusing on like, oh, hey, here's throw an ad out, throw some sort of content out, see if people will come by and look at IronMike. Like, no, we have people looking at IronMike, so we should focus on those people first. Once we're done with that, then of course we could obviously expand, and or even at the same time, we should continue marketing to just anyone in general, but just kind of focusing in a non-sleazy way, just kind of pushing extra features or working just with, just one-on-one, just like talking with people that actually use it and seeing like, hey, what could be improved? What would make you pay? This custom domain's important to you, like stuff like that. It's actually having more communication with the people currently on your platform, I think is huge.
So I absolutely agree. And I like that strategy because it really does help build your brand, right? So if you get, say, 100 free users, aside from being a small sign of commitment, like getting that commitment from the user to just use their service and maybe eventually upgrade, you also get, as you said, to place those footers at the bottom that say "powered by IronMike," right? And visitors will see that, customers will see that, potential customers will see that. Essentially, building your brand, and it's such a great idea, and I think that a lot of indie makers should actually aspire to use that model, right? So think of paid first. This might sound a little strange considering that I built a completely free service, but definitely think about paid first and then reduce to free if you're building a paid SaaS, right? So that way you can have more commitment for people and from people, and they're probably definitely more likely to convert. So you mentioned something. This is moving away from IronMike for a moment to focus on the indie maker community in general, because I always like discussing the community and how we can improve and strategies for new indie makers that are entering the scene and looking at what everybody's doing. What are your thoughts, as you mentioned when we started this podcast, about quality versus quantity? What are your thoughts on these 12 startups 12 startups a year challenge?
Right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, so, I mean, obviously, for example, so with Ethan doing the 24-hour challenge, right? Building, what was it? The profile, right? Maker.rocks.
Maker.rocks.
Right? I think those types of things are good in the sense of actually being active in the community, personal branding, like from that perspective. I think that's huge. And I think that's also why a lot of people do the 12 products per year, because again, it's, cranking out features very quickly and being kind of at the top of like, oh, look at him. He released something last a month, and the month before I remember, this person because I see them more frequently. And so from a branding aspect, I think it's huge. But from a sustainability aspect, actually having products that you really focus on, you try to grow them, and kind of focusing more on like the quality versus, you don't want to have like 12 MVP stage products. You want to have just one really good, like well-polished product that when someone lands on it, especially if you're making it paid, when someone lands on it, they immediately will want to sign up. Like your conversion rate is going to be really high versus across kind of distributed multiple products. Now, if you make more products and they're all high quality, more power to you. I think you should definitely focus on that route. Also, if you're just kind of testing the waters and you don't know what to build, go ahead and do that. But if you're actually focusing on, I guess, more of a business aspect or more of like, you kind of have a good idea of what you want to focus on and build, and kind of have that one idea be like across like multiple years. Like for example, with IronMike, I don't see, it achieving an enormous amount of success in just 5 years. It could be like a 10-year plan. It might turn into a different idea or a different business in 10 years, but just kind of focusing and honing on like just one thing will allow you to keep improving on that one thing versus kind of, distributing kind of your skill sets or ideas and kind of seeing what sticks. So once you do find something that could potentially get some sort of success, just focus on that. And yeah, just kind of, don't, I guess it's kind of like putting your eggs in one basket, but at the very least, you can, I don't know how to properly say this, like, you can kind of get a lot just from that one idea in terms of what you learn from it, and sticking with it over the course of multiple years, you'll be able to kind of see that industry or whatever it is grow over time versus kind of just tasting every little thing. And so even if it's not successful in the beginning, you can definitely kind of create your own luck by just sticking with it for a long time. So I think it depends on what you're doing, but I think both are valid. I personally like to stick with one thing if I know for sure, like I have a good idea in my head and I have this, this vision in my head. I prefer to stick with it long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I am also a person that's stuck with one product, of course, MakerLog and the family of products under the MakerLog radar. And I agree. I definitely think that, you should stick to one thing instead of trying to throw as many things as possible into the wall and see what sticks, right? So I'm actually...
also, you don't know if it's going to, like, if you see something stick, you don't know if it's going to stick for a long time, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You should, I think, still, even if something doesn't stick, try it out for over a year. Like, it might work eventually. You don't know without trying, right?
Sometimes things are like, for example, viral successes, right? So, or fads. So you have something and it turns out everybody on Product Hunt liked it on launch day, and oh my God, you have 1 million users now. But on the long term, turns out nobody uses it. And you keep pouring energy into it, and it doesn't really work. Well, you have to find a drop-off point in which at one point you say, okay, this didn't really work, and it was a one-time success, and I should move on, right?
Yeah. And also, like, you could still diversify, right? So, this, again, going back to personal branding, I think that's still like such a huge, important thing to know is that, IronMike is not like, if IronMike fails tomorrow, I honestly could care less because I'm still growing, my personal brand and the content stuff around it. And so I could immediately go from IronMike to some other thing, like, I don't know, Iron Banana or something. I don't know. But I could, pivot and go off to something else, maybe get some of the people that were on IronMike onto the new idea. But it was really just coming from my personal brand. And so it's still good to like diversify kind of the things that you do, but don't focus on kind of one thing, and that is like product building. don't diversify that until you have one thing that is sticking, that is working. Once you get that kind of going, that's part of what IronMike, kind of the purpose of it being like an automated business. And so it would be self-sufficient once we get it to a point where, okay, it's generating some monthly recurring revenue, and then I can move on to another product and kind of, repeat that formula over and over. But if it does fail, move on to the next thing. I still have my personal brand. I'm still creating content, and I'm still doing stuff that I enjoy. And so that's the main thing. If you do that, you're less likely to burn out.
Absolutely. And it's you were saying, yeah, absolutely. And 12 projects a year, at least I'm a heavy critic of it. I don't think it's a great idea. You're going to be dropping a lot on the quality. You're going to be dropping the ball a lot on the quality of the products. And I'd rather have, for example, at least in my case, I'd rather have like a good, well-made product than have 12 crappy products that don't even work and are just out there.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, and that also ties back, as you said, on the personal brand, right? So if you're building a personal brand, you don't want to attach 12 little badly made things to it, right? You want to be held into that standard of quality and for example, in my case, I always make my products with a lot of thought and very high quality, and I take my time with it, mostly because I set a standard of quality, right? I want my users to be able to expect good, high quality, working things from me instead of expecting, one-time lunch on Product Hunt and that's it and it's dead, right? So, and there's been a lot of people that have discovered this the hard way, right? So, Dinuka was one a case that lately, caught my attention, that he was doing the 12 projects a year challenge, and he noticed that he eventually became extremely burned out, right? He and his team became extremely burned out after a while of shipping products, and they eventually left that tactic completely, because even though the products were relatively successful, now they had 12 products to maintain, right? And that's extremely tough, right? So it definitely does not work very well on burnout. It does not work very well in quality, and there's definitely been cases out there that have had a very successful trajectory with this, and it has worked for some people, most notably community leaders like Levels, right? He is literally the creator of this movement, I think. But it doesn't work for everybody, and it's mostly likely to not work. So that's kind of my objection with it. And yeah, I'm not exactly sure that it works. What are your thoughts on the effectiveness of this method?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it will work for some people. I think they're the outliers, like people that are really efficient at what they do and can kind of go from idea to product very quickly, especially just reusing like templates, boilerplates. Like there's ways to do it where you can do it really efficiently. But I think for most people, like it doesn't really make sense. And that's not to say that not everyone is like a good enough like developer to do that or what. But I think I think it's much easier to just focus on one product. And the other thing is, I think there's like a coolness aspect to it where, especially around the time when like it seemed like everyone was doing it, you wanted to join in too, and you're like, I can do 12 products a year too, right? But it's really not a competition or a race, and it's not like, if you're just doing it just to kind of look cool and have like, a bunch of, Twitter usernames in your bio, like if you're just doing it for that reason with like different emojis, like, you're probably in it for the wrong reasons. So now, for example, I only have IronMike and Sunny Commutes, the podcast, on my bio, and that's it. And I could care less. It could be one product on there. Like I could care less in terms of being cool or being the person with like doing many different things. I just kind of want to do a couple of things that I care about and do them really well. So that allows me to also in terms of burnout, kind of try to manage that a little bit better, because I enjoy making videos. I enjoy, writing articles and all those things related to my personal brand. And so it's much easier to kind of manage it in my head, saying like, this is all under like my website, and write an article today. I'll do a video tomorrow. Maybe I'll code the next day, but kind of just focusing on a few small things versus being like, oh, I have 4 projects. Well, that project needs a new website. Like the landing page is kind of outdated. That project, I know there's like a bug broken on that. And there's just all these types of things that like kind of pile up, and it's all in your head, and you put on some black backlog or something, but it still kind of sticks in your head, and it's just too much to manage. So in terms of kind of like brain capacity, like kind of just simplifying things, not really getting worked up on anything. I think just simplify, like focus on what you enjoy doing the most, and just do that one thing, 1 or 2 things, and that's it. Like, you really shouldn't care about what people might think of that, or if it's cool, or whatever the case might be. It's not a competition. Just do what you care about.
I agree so much with that, because as you said, how do I express this? Yeah, I mean, just generally a huge yeah to everything you said. I'm just gonna probably recap literally what you said and then rephrase it, but yes, exactly. You're completely right. It's not about that competition of showing that you did X products a year. And yes, mental overload. It's a thing. It happens. If you have way too many projects under your belt, and you have to consider that you have to provide support. You have to do bug fixing, maintenance, help. Things break. You might be awake at 2 a.m. for each one because your server completely broke. All those things pile up, and it causes burnout. And that's something a lot of people don't consider, and that's what, unfortunately, a lot of makers that do this challenge find out the hard way.
Right, and when you're kind of watching them in that journey, you're like, oh damn, like this person's like really awesome. They're they're super active, but then you see a couple months after that, like they're not doing anything, right?
Exactly.
So what's the point? Do you want to have do you want to work on one project continuously, or do you just want to quit eventually? So I think
Absolutely. So we are pretty much at the hour mark right here. So we're going to be concluding the stream and the podcast right now. I'm going to ask one more question, even though I have a massive list of things that I really want to ask. I'm going to ask one more question. What advice, and this is the traditional Shipcast question, what advice would you give to indie makers out there that are new to the scene, trying to build a product and trying to find customers?
I should have watched the first episode and come up with an answer, but I think on the spot, like, I think there's a lot of, it's not just in the maker community, but I think in development and programming communities as well, there's a lot in terms of imposter syndrome, in terms of thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, or I need to, have skills A and B to be able to do this, or, not smart enough, I'm not like these people, etc. I think, especially the maker community, I think it's open to literally anyone, especially because of the no-code movements where you don't even need to learn how to code. Like Fajar Siddiq, he launched a game on Product Hunt. He used, I forget the tool, but he built a game with a no-code platform, so didn't write a single line of code, and he launched a #1 product on Product Hunt.
Absolutely.
And so I think like that's huge in terms of like being inclusive, getting anyone that wants to build products, if you have any ounce of interest in it, like one, it's worth it, I think. Just the launch aspect of it, I think it's a great surge of energy and everything. But yeah, just like anyone can do it. I think you don't have to learn how to code. If you do want to learn how to code, though, you don't have to be an amazing programmer. You don't have to be a good developer. Like you'll learn as you go. But you don't need much. You'll learn like kind of while building that product. So yeah, just start. I guess that's the advice. Just start. Just build something, and together we make. Right?
Absolutely. #together we make. All right, everybody. So thank you for listening to the Shipcast. It's been an absolute honor to have Sunny Singh here. And